Welcome back, everyone. Next, we have ASP Isotopes Inc. It trades on the NASDAQ under the symbol ASPI. It is a pre-commercial stage advanced materials company dedicated to the development of technology and processes to produce isotopes for use in multiple industries. Please welcome its CEO, Paul Mann. Welcome, Paul.
Thanks again for having me back, and thanks for your interest. So I'll do a quick 15-20 minute presentation today, and then we'll have some time for Q&A at the end, if that's okay. So I'll go through our corporate slide deck. And so we're a NASDAQ company, so here are some forward-looking statements and disclaimers. And so what do we do? Well, we separate isotopes, which are very special chemicals. And we'll talk about what they are, exactly what our chemicals are in a moment. But our main industries are medical, semiconductors, and nuclear energy. And we've had a lot of interest from a number of companies in each of those end markets. And we basically have three verticals within our company. ASP Isotopes produces stable isotopes, which basically don't degrade, and they're used often to make other isotopes used in very special industries, and we'll talk more about exactly what they are. And that's how we started the company up 3 years ago. And then we have PET Labs, which is a radioisotope company that produces radioisotopes for use in medical applications, mainly diagnostic scanning and cancer treatment and oncology treatment. And then finally, we have Quantum Leap Energy, which we incorporated last September. And that's focusing on producing the nuclear fuels of the future, specifically high assay, low enriched uranium, and lithium-6 and lithium-7. In terms of our milestones for the year, this slide kind of describes what our goals are for the year. And I guess we've already hit the first bullet point already, so maybe we'll try and update that before our next presentation. But our goal this year is to generate sufficient revenues for ASP Isotopes and PET Labs to become positive cash flow. And we also intend to enter additional supply agreements so we can start building additional plants around the world. So, people ask, what are isotopes? So an isotope is a very special form of chemicals. When you think about elements in the periodic table, carbon is different to oxygen, is different to hydrogen. They've got different numbers of protons in the nucleus, and that defines their chemical properties and kind of chemical reactions that can undergo. But if we look at a specific element, often they have different numbers of neutrons in the nucleus, and that makes them physically different, have different physical properties, but they're very hard to separate. So let's take silicon-28 as an example. Silicon, like sand on a beach, has three isotopes. One has a mass of 28, another 29, another 30. And silicon's obviously used in semiconductors to use the processors that are made in your iPhones and in your Apple Macs and in your computers. And if we can remove that 29 isotope, the conductivity of that silicon increases thousands of fold, and the heat transfer capabilities increases multiples of. And so silicon-28 has a very specific use in advanced semiconductors and quantum computing. So if I take a bag of sand, that kilo of sand probably costs about $1. If I take a kilo of silicon-28, that kilo of silicon-28 costs $600,000. If I take carbon-14, a kilo of charcoal, about $1 a kilo. A kilo of carbon-14 is about $24 million a kilo. So we take these really basic chemicals and turn them into very special materials that enable certain industries to operate. Now, why is the isotopes industry struggling, or some issues? This chart kind of explains it all, really. There's no domestic US producer of stable isotopes in the forms we're trying to produce. 85% of stable isotopes for medicine are produced in Russia, the remainder in Europe. And so since we started the company up as a US stable isotope company, we've had a lot of interest from companies who require supply chain diversification to try and secure the supply of stable isotopes. So we have two technologies that we use to do this. And our technologies come from the South African enrichment program back in the 1980s. South Africa during the apartheid years wasn't able to import a lot of materials the rest of the world freely traded because of trade embargoes. So a group of scientists there started to try and enrich uranium for their nuclear reactor and also for nuclear weapons. In the 1970s, South Africa announced that they could enrich uranium. They then went on to build 6 nuclear weapons and allegedly also conduct a nuclear test. When apartheid finished, our scientists were left without work. And so they spent their next sort of 20 years, as scientists do, developing methods to enrich isotopes, bouncing from one project to the next, one grant to the next. And we discovered them about 3 years ago and thought, actually, this could become a really interesting commercial capability if we could finance it correctly, invest in it correctly, and build some plants to produce these isotopes. So we have two technologies that we will use or employ to enrich isotopes. The first is the aerodynamic separation process, and that's basically a stationary wall centrifuge. So when you think about a Russian centrifuge enriching uranium, the tube spins round very quickly, and that forces the heavier isotopes out to the wall, and the lighter isotopes less so. And that allows you to separate the heavy from the light. These plants are huge, size of football fields. Often they have a power station next to them to power it, and they cost billions of dollars to build and take years to build. Our process is much simpler. We have a stationary wall. We spin the gas inside the vertical tube, and at the middle of the tube, the gas approaches the speed of sound. We then put the gas through various flow directors and nozzles that we've invented and developed, and that allows us to separate the heavy from the light. Now, our plants are much cheaper than a centrifuge, tens of millions rather than billions, and we can enrich light isotopes as well as heavy isotopes. So a centrifuge can only enrich isotopes with very heavy masses like uranium. They can't enrich light masses like carbon-14 and silicon-28, and we can. I guess the downside to our process, we use a bit more energy. So, we're looking to find locations where energy is very cheap so we can put plants there. Our second process is quantum enrichment. And this is great for something you can't turn into a gas. And there's lots of elements you can't turn into gases, and this allows us to enrich those. And so basically we vaporize the metal, we pass it through a laser. The laser ionizes one of the isotopes, which is then attracted to a charged collector plate, and then we extract that off the collector plate. So this slide just summarizes those technologies. They're very cost-effective, modular, scalable, and very environmentally friendly. So let's talk about the opportunity in nuclear medicine, and we'll start trying to accelerate this because we're running a bit behind time here. So nuclear medicine is one of the larger opportunities that we have. It's a multi-billion-dollar market already, and it's really benefiting from a lot of regulatory approvals and new medicines to treat novel forms of cancer. So this chart shows the isotopes we're interested in enriching. By the end of 2025, we should be able to enrich or produce all or most of these isotopes on this chart. Carbon-14 we expect to enrich later on this year, or actually right now. Molybdenum-100, zinc-68, nickel-64, and ytterbium-176. And they all turned into a radioisotope that's used to treat a patient. So ASP Isotopes produces the stable isotopes. They're converted into a radioisotope near the point of care where you can transport it maybe 2 to 3 hours to treat the patient. So molybdenum-100 is one of the larger opportunities that we have. We've signed a large contract with a Chinese customer for up to $27 million of molybdenum-100 every year. That'll take some time to grow into, but molybdenum-100 is stable. You can ship it in a FedEx package. And the current workhorse of nuclear medicine is molybdenum-99 and technetium-99. Molybdenum-99 comes out of a nuclear reactor, and it degrades to form technetium-99. And that's injected into a patient to diagnose, bone breaks and cardiovascular problems and neurological problems. Molybdenum-100 is stable. You can ship it around the world in a FedEx package and convert it to technetium-99 at the point of care. We think this is a very large opportunity, but will take some time to grow into. Ytterbium-176 is an isotope we're very excited about. So this is a new form of oncology, new form of cancer drug, which uses lutetium-177 as a payload to destroy the tumor. The best way to produce lutetium-177 is from ytterbium-176. There's a real shortage of ytterbium-176 right now. Novartis's leading drug has consensus forecasts of over $4 billion for this, for oncology indications. And during the clinical trial, 5% of patients died because they couldn't actually make the drug. Right now, there's a 2-month wait to get hold of the drug because of the shortage in ytterbium-176. And we hope to have ytterbium-176 available during 2025 from our facility down here in South Africa. And zinc-68 will likely be our first plant in Iceland. We're going to start building plants in Iceland coming this summer. And this is used as a diagnostic marker for any drug involved in lutetium-177 or actinium-225. And this could be a huge opportunity over the next sort of 5 or 10 years. And as I said earlier, there's not really any Western producers of zinc-68 that can be turned into this end product. Here's a picture of our carbon-14 plant. We've signed a contract with a Canadian customer to produce carbon-14, and we expect to start supplying that over the summer this year. That's for a minimum take or pay of $2.5 million a year. And, this is the picture of the plant, and you can see kind of how modular and small scale our plants are. The carbon-14 market could be larger. The customers indicated they'd like more than the minimum take or pay. And so, maybe we can do a bit more than $2.5 million this year. So this chart just summarizes what I just said a moment ago about where each of our isotopes are and when we expect to have them in the marketplace. So semiconductors is a market that has really become exciting in the last sort of 2 or 3 months, quite frankly. We've been talking to semiconductor companies for probably 2 years now, explaining why we think silicon-28 is an exciting way to make super fast semiconductors that will enable artificial intelligence and quantum computing. And I guess, the last sort of 3 months or so, there's a bit of a scramble from the semiconductor companies to get hold of this silicon-28. And I think, we're probably the only company that can enrich silicon-28 in the form of silane. And silane is what semiconductor companies want to use in their fabs to make semiconductors. And so we've signed 2 contracts, one with a semiconductor company, the other with a large industrial gas company, to start supplying silicon-28 later this year. Also, depleted germanium-73 is another opportunity for us. And again, we're talking to a number of companies who need depleted germanium-73. So I mentioned Iceland a few times. Our plants today are in South Africa. We have 2 plants here in South Africa. We're building a 3rd. And South Africa does not benefit from a large amount of energy. We often have blackouts for hours at a time in a day. We get around that by having a diesel generator to keep our plants going while we haven't got power. But obviously, in Iceland, energy is bubbles out of the ground. It's extremely cheap. It's extremely environmentally friendly. So our plan is to build our future plants in Iceland, and we have interest from about 4 customers for different plants in Iceland, and we'll hope to build those later on this year. So nuclear energy, and a lot of interest in nuclear energy right now. The problem is well known. Between now and 2050, we probably have to more than double the amount of energy that the world needs or produces. We have to do that whilst keeping net zero targets in our mind, and that's a real big challenge. How we achieve one while with the constraint of the other. And in our opinion, the obvious solution is more nuclear power. And during COP28 in Dubai last November, 24 countries backed a declaration to triple the amount of nuclear power by 2050. Obviously, they need the fuel for that. I'm not quite sure where the fuel is going to come from. The future for nuclear power, in our view, is a small modular reactor. This is like the Ford Model T in motor cars, when you put something onto a production line, the cost of production drops dramatically. So these are much smaller reactors than what we used to build in the past. Historically, a nuclear reactor was 1 to 4 gigawatts of energy, and they're built in the middle of nowhere with large transmission lines to get that power to where the population centers were. These are much smaller, up to a few hundred megawatts, enough to power a single city. Maybe they take up a couple of acres in land. Very, very cheap to produce, very quick to build. Some of the companies involved in this industry, TerraPower, that's a company formed by Bill Gates. He's the chairman. X Energy, that's Cam Gafassian. Again, he was the founder and the chairman as well. Rolls-Royce are here. And so is Oklo. Sam Altman is the chairman of Oklo. And this is all very exciting. The problem is these reactors require a new form of uranium. So traditionally, nuclear reactors used low-enriched uranium, which is enriched up to 5% in the U-235 isotope. In the future, reactors will require HALEU, or higher, low-enriched uranium, and that's enriched up to 19.75%. There is no Western producer of HALEU today. So we've actually signed 2 MOUs with large US-based SMR companies to try and build facilities to produce them HALEU. And collectively, they require over $30 billion of HALEU between now and 2037. And from what we can see, there's no Western producer of that fuel for them today. We'd like to use quantum enrichment for uranium. I explained how quantum enrichment works earlier on. And this compares quantum enrichment to other isotope enrichment methods. So the selectivity, the fourth line down here, is what drives the efficacy of the enrichment process. And so you'll see for a centrifuge, the alpha there is 1.15. But for quantum enrichment, the alpha is greater than 50, so it's 50 times more efficacious than a centrifuge. And this chart here just shows quantum enrichment in real life. This is lithium-6 and lithium-7. So you'll see the chart on the right-hand side. That top chart is the feedstock. Lithium-6 is at 7%. Lithium-7 is at 93%. And after a single pass through our enrichment chamber, lithium-6 is up at over 90%, and lithium-7 is below 10%. So that's for an enrichment factor of 112 versus 1.15 for a centrifuge. Why is this important? Well, nuclear fuel supply chains are showing extreme amounts of supply-side stress right now. Many of these market prices for uranium, the conversion, the enrichment are up 3 to 5-fold during the last sort of 2 years or so. And there's a real shortage of any production capabilities here. It's very rare to see a commodity go up 5-fold in price and not see a supply-side response. And that's kind of what we've seen here. What does this mean for HALEU? Well, if one could produce HALEU today, it's likely over $20,000 a kilo. And when most of these SMRs were going through their economics, the expected price was less than $10,000 a kilo, more like $5,000. And so we've seen a real increase in the cost of HALEU, and this is really going to hurt some of the unit economics of some of these SMR programs. So why do we think this is exciting? Well, because our enrichment factor is so much greater than other things like centrifuges, we believe we can take depleted tails, and that's basically waste from other enrichers. And you'll see that picture on the right-hand side there of depleted tail sitting in Ohio. And each of those metal cylinders contains 20 metric tons of uranium hexafluoride that is the waste of a prior enrichment process. And we believe we can take that and convert it straight into HALEU. And that will really drive down our cost of production. If we're not having to buy ore from the marketplace, and our cost of enrichment is very effective, it allows us to really reprice the cost of HALEU, reprice the cost of nuclear fuel. And that's what the world needs in order to drive nuclear power into emerging markets. We cannot have nuclear power trading at a premium to hydrocarbon-based energy. It has to trade at a discount. And we believe this will allow it to trade at a discount in years to come. And that's one of the reasons why I believe the SMR companies are interested in our technology. One of them's actually given us $2 million to develop some of the initial research and process to advance these technologies. I don't believe we've ever seen an SMR company or nuclear reactor company invest in the enrichment process. Typically, enrichment processes are very large capital projects paid for by governments with very low, if any, return on capital. Ours are much lower capital and a significant return on capital. So to summarize, we have a proven and proprietary technology developed over about 20 years in South Africa, multiple secular and geopolitical tailwinds that are driving a long list of customers who require isotopes urgently. And I say we're about to start our first two plants up in South Africa, and we expect to start generating free cash flow, during the second half of the year. So I'll stop there and I'll take any questions that you may have.
Great job, Paul. We do have some questions for you. Let's start with Sean Rady. Are there any updates on the molybdenum 100 supply contract for Brickium, BRICEM? Has ASPI commenced production on that?
Yeah, so we're probably going to prioritize silicon over molybdenum this year. So they both come from the same plant in South Africa, and we have contracts for both. But the total addressable market for silicon in years to come dwarfs that of molybdenum. When you think about it, in an iPhone, it's about 5 grams of silicon. And if we can drive our costs down to maybe, let's just say, $20 a gram, and would someone pay an extra $100 for an iPhone or for an Android or whatever phone you have to see the battery last a lot longer and to have much faster processing times? Probably yes. And so, we're being pushed by a lot of semiconductor companies, mainly in the US, to try and really advance our silicon production as quickly as possible. And that drive wasn't there, say, 2 years ago or 18 months or 12 months ago. So we will still produce both, but we'll focus much more on silicon 28, where there is, right now we have companies fighting to get the next kilogram out of our plant. And that kind of demand, that urge, that requirement wasn't there 6 months ago. It's arrived in the last 6 months.
Thank you for that. John has a question asking, will the QLE spin out be timed for when the outstanding permits is obtained for HALEU production?
Yeah, so I don't have a crystal ball, so I can't tell you when we will get our permit or permission to build a HALEU plant, hopefully sooner rather than later. But yeah, we'll likely spin QLE out when we've got more clarity on where the first plant is going to be and the timing of that first plant. And we expect that in the next, 12, 18 months. So I just don't have a crystal ball. I can't tell you when it's going to happen. It's driven by governments rather than ourselves. And governments generally don't move as quickly as we move.
And which isotope has the highest profit margin?
Well, from stuff we produce now, probably carbon-14, because we don't pay for the feedstock. It's just a tolling process. And it's also in an environment where our energy costs in South Africa are actually quite low. So carbon-14 has a very high gross margin. But, we look to make a pharmaceutical-like gross margin on most of the products we will ever produce.
So here's a complicated question. I'm going to break it down, asking, are the recent capital raises a pivot from the prior communicated strategy to use a third-party company balance sheets, or in addition to? And is the growing race to be the first to bring HALEU to market, or does ASPI deem there is a comfortable buffer given its IP?
Yeah, so we've been fairly careful raising capital. So, we raised capital for Quantum Leap via a convertible note, which I think was under very, very attractive terms, quite frankly. And then we did we induced a warrant exercise for $5.5 million, at probably close to a 52-week high or all-time ever high. So our balance sheet right now has never been better capitalized. We have more money than we've ever had before. It doesn't mean we're going to spend it wildly. We're very, very cautious on how we spend our money. Management own 30% of the equity of this business, and so every dollar we spend, 30 cents is our own. So we're pretty we're pretty careful where we spend our money. So I think we've been pretty careful, and I say we've been very careful how we raise capital. In terms of about speed to market for HALEU, we'd like to be the first to market. We can build a plant very quickly. Our plants are much smaller, much quicker to build, much easier to build than the large centrifuges that the world has relied on for the last 20 or 30 years. But, we require a permit from a government to allow us to build a plant. And, who knows how long that's going to take. I'm hoping it won't take too long, but again, it's out of my control. But once we have the permission to build a plant, we can really build a plant very quickly. And we have the capabilities and skills in-house ready to build those plants.
Thank you for that. Jeremy says the increase in value is phenomenal. All in, what does a profit margin look like from your enhancements?
We've always said we want to make us kind of a pharmaceutical-like gross margin for stable isotopes, and and we don't have much SG&A. Last year we spent about $5 million in operating free cash flow, so that paid for all of R&D. It paid for our 70 employees here in South Africa. And by the way, of our 70 employees, 20% have got PhDs, 50% have got advanced degrees. It pays for our buildings. It pays for our lawyers, our accountants, our auditors, our filing fees, all the stuff you need to pay to keep a Delaware NASDAQ company going. So we're very, very careful where we spend our money. So, if we can get a pharmaceutical-like gross margin and keep our SG&A tightly bound, then hopefully we should see some good operating leverage as we start to grow the top line.
Brito asks, who is your Silicon 28 customer?
So we've signed confidentiality agreements with both our Silicon 28. We've actually signed 2 Silicon 28 contracts. And both have NDAs, so we're not allowed to disclose their names. But it's a large, they're large, well-known companies that you would likely know. One in the semiconductor industry and one in the industrial gas industry.
Sam Thrower asks if you would please comment on ASPI's quantum computing market customers, both now and projected into 2024.
Oh, yeah. So, listen, I think in the short term, it's going to semiconductor companies. Maybe there's some government buyers as well. I think we'll sell every gram of Silicon 28 we can produce this year, is my guess. Where we go longer term, I don't know. We'll have to see how the development of advanced semiconductors goes and where it moves to. Again, I don't know, but we're ready to produce as much as the customers require. And we can produce it very, very cheaply, and we can build capacity extremely quickly.
Tim says earlier in the year, you mentioned the firm would provide forward-looking guidance at some point in Q2, Q3. Is that still on track?
Yeah, I guess we can do that. We're still in Q2, Q3, so we'll do that at some point, I guess. We've been very busy just doing other things. So, yeah, we'll think about trying to do that at some point, yeah.
Javier asks, when is the QLE spin-out anticipated?
I think the answer there is as soon as possible, but there's certain things we have to do to make it attractive to investors. And so I think we'd like to have some clarity on where our first location is going to be. At least have and that maybe that takes a few weeks, maybe it takes a few months, but sooner rather than later is the goal. We've always said this is a very different business to medical isotopes. As our medical isotopes becomes profitable and starts to grow, that's the time to separate the two businesses out.
Perfect. And question from Jeff, which governments have approved SMR plant designs?
Well, I believe there's only one SMR that's ever been built, and I believe that's in China. But there are a number of SMRs being built in the US, but I don't believe any of them actually have their final permits to operate yet. But again, a lot of them haven't got the fuel to start building. So, what comes first, the chicken or the egg? You need the fuel to build a plant.
Well, and Jeff asks, do you have to wait for SMR to be approved for operation before an SMR can start buying HALEU? How does that work?
No, we have demand to take HALEU right now if we could produce it. We could sell every kilo we can produce. One of our customers has asked if we could store it because they can't take it onto their site before a specified date, and another customer will take it as soon as we can produce it.
Great. Do you have any closing remarks for our viewers today?
Yeah, just look, it's a really exciting time in this industry right now. There's lots going on. A lot of big sort of end markets are changing where they need new modern isotopes, and hopefully we're here to fill that gap for them. I'd like to thank everyone for their interest in our company. And if they've got any questions, there's an ask a question kind of box on our website, and send it in and we'll answer.
Always great speaking with you, Paul. Thank you so much for joining us on the conference again. Have a great rest of your day.
Thank you for your time.
All right, everyone. Thank you so much for watching. This completes day one. We'll see you back here tomorrow morning, 9 a.m. Eastern, for day 2 of our Super Virtual Investor Conference. Thank you all for watching.